tradition. And I said, wow, you showed us a state. Pretty good.
At the opening, I'll announce that so people can kind of plan what they want to do. Hello? We're on. Welcome back, everyone, for night number 2 of the summer session. You'll have plenty of time to get your book signed by Dr. Tanaka tonight. As you can see, I think many of you already discovered, we have our Honganji bookstore over in attendance tonight, and with Dr. Tanaka's 2 books available. And so, please take a look, and you can have a nice souvenir of this summer session with his signed copy of one of his books. First of all, I just want to thank everyone that's helped to make this summer session possible again. Our technical crew, Miles and David, and Faye at the registration desk, and Carrie and Reverend Kevin helping to get the place all spiffed up with new air conditioners and all that kind of thing. So, and speaking of the air conditioners, if you get too cold or too hot, Reverend Dr. Tanaka taught us yesterday, we can do 3 things. And what are those things? Accept, leave, or improve. So if you want to improve it, just let one of us know and we'll adjust it, because they're brand new, so we're just trying to figure out, how the airflow goes and all that. So, but if you want to just sit and suffer, that's okay too. But remember, it's optional. Okay. See, I've been listening. Okay. So for those of you that may not be familiar with the Buddha Study Center, our restrooms are through that side door up front here. Refreshments are laid out for your pleasure. If you need to get something to drink, you need to stretch your legs, please feel free to quietly, do so during the sessions. We do, I think, still have some lunch sign-ups. I don't know is that all full, Faye? Yeah, there's still lunch sign-ups with Dr. Tanaka available. And please manage your cell phones, so that we can all live in harmony together. The format, is from 6:30 to 7:30. We'll have part 1, and then maybe if things go well, a 15-minute question and answer, period, followed by a 15-minute break. Okay, and then we'll reconvene at 8 o'clock for part 2 for about 45 minutes with another 15-minute question and answer period. I brought tonight note cards that I'll pass out so that you can write down your questions, and if you're too shy to ask a question, you can give it to me or to Faye at the desk, and we will get it to Dr. Tanaka. Okay, and he may also then address those during the Q&As. In addition, because through the graciousness of Dr. Tanaka, he has offered to hold a pauhana session from 9 o'clock to about 9:30. So those of you that want to ask him questions or kind of clarify some things after our 9 o'clock hour end, you're welcome to stay. Refreshments will still be out, and you can talk story and have pauhana with Dr. Tanaka. Okay, so I think without further ado, we can have Dr. Tanaka start part 1 of night 2. Yeah, the handouts we'll distribute, as soon as they're ready, so you'll get them nice and warm.
Okay, is this on? All right. Okay. Okay. Here come the hand. So, second night. I hope you're all doing well. I'm getting gradually adjusted to the Honolulu time. Um, so I think I should be able to finish this session. While they're delivering, I thought maybe I would just say a little bit more about myself, which introduction yesterday, what I'm going to talk about wasn't mentioned, which is that I have a strong Hawaii connection. Actually, my great-grandfather immigrated from Kumamoto to Hawaii. I don't know, probably in the 1890s, and so from what I heard, he was involved in church and probably Buddhist temple, but doesn't sound like Honpa Honganji. Maybe it's the other branch. I don't know. Never, came. But more importantly, my grandfather, whose son, actually he followed my great-grandfather as a teenager to come to Hawaii and was also involved in church. But this time, I think it was Honpa, because the story is that Bishop Imamura at one point asked him whether he wanted to become a priest. And if so, then the Honpa will pay for his education to Japan. But he, for different reasons, declined. So had he taken up that offer, certainly my life would have been different. But at least now his grandson went into the field, So that's a bit of my Hawaii connection. So my mother was born in Honolulu and was probably lived around here. But before the war, she went to Japan because my grandfather wanted to go back to Japan because he sensed that the war was coming, and he had this mythology that the Meiji people, that Japan never loses. So if such is the case, let's go back. But I think it's more of an excuse, it sounds like it's. But anyway, so my mother went to Japan and was there during the war and married my father, who was a regular Japanese. And he actually, they got married before the war started. During the war, I think, yeah, right. I'm not sure exactly when, but he went off to Army, and he was married at that time. And he was in Manchuria, where Japanese Army had a huge contingent protect, Manchuria. He didn't fight, he said, at all. But right at the tail end, as you know, Russia came in, and he got captured, and he spent about a year in the prison. He was a POW. But he never talked about it. He talked about it a little bit at the end of his life, but I knew it was a hardship for him. And then after he came back, he managed to come back, and after the war, I don't know if this is true, but any American citizen, a female, who married an Asian male could not return to America. There was a law, such law apparently. And during Eisenhower's time, that law got changed, so she was then able to come back. But this time, didn't come back here, but went to California. But it's actually my father who wanted to come to America. I think he wanted to do something with his life, And actually, I talk about a bit of this in a TV program, documentary program that NHK did on my life and my activities, and which I think I will show during the session, probably on Friday. And I was not sure it afterwards, but I think it will be interesting enough for you to see it during the session, and I can weave it into the session. And of course, it's all in Japanese. So I will translate as we go along. And so I think that would be, of interest to you. Anyway, okay, so that now that we have our I don't have a handout. Okay. So, okay, Carrie, thank you. Okay. So, yeah, I just sent this about 5 o'clock, and we kind of missed each other, and then it was 6 pages, but it's been done. But I think it would be fine. Okay, so the second session will be on 2 topics, both dealing with death. And so our the title is Confronting One's Own Death and That of Our Loved Ones. And so the first part is on our own death, and then the second part on death of our loved ones, both living and deceased. Okay, so starting out, I wanted to say that the fear of death was the main motivation for my reason to take Buddhism seriously. When I was in high school, maybe my sophomore year, one night, I just experienced this enormous fear and realization that I'm going to die. I mean, you kind of know, of course, but it hits you existentially. And I was so shaken up, I couldn't sleep that night. And that really made me, be more serious about the teachings. So it's been the main reason why I went into this field, and main reason why I became a minister. Oh, of course, the other reason is to become rich. Ministers becoming rich, right? I wouldn't say this in Japan, because if I said it in Japan, they wouldn't laugh like you, because not all ministers are priests, but some ministers are pretty wealthy, because their system is differently, especially in big temples, in the cities. Some of them drive, Benz and BMWs. But I don't want to give you a wrong impression. Most of the ministers are not like that. But there are some, and they, provide that image sometimes. But in the U.S., the picture. So I used to say this. People ask you, why do you become minister? And the first time I said, to become rich. And people all, share, okay. Yeah. All right, so the second is that I did this survey in Japan. Which death is concerning to you more? Death, your own death, or death of your loved one? And which do you think had greater number of answers? It's well, let me ask you, okay? So when I say concern, I mean, fear, or, it bugs you, it gives you anxiety. So is it your own death or death of your loved one? Okay, so I'm going to ask you your own death, okay? Okay, death of your loved ones. Okay. All right, so there you have it. And it was similar in Japan. And so so that's why I've decided to do first one on yourself and second one on that of others. So now, today, the first session is more on what happens after we die, or I die. Actually, I keep using we, but we should probably say I. Because yesterday, what did I say? Buddhism is a matter of first person, not third person or second person. Okay? So what happens after we die? And in general, you have, you know, these views. First one, nothing continues on. When you die, it's over. Okay? And that's the first view. And I don't need to explain too much. And you know, materialists and maybe communists and you know, they don't believe in religion so much, so that they probably subscribe to this one. But the other one is something continues on in some form, and there are two ways, two forms. One as an individual identity that, you know, I, for example, Ken Tanaka, continues on with an individual identity. And so, and under that, you can find eternal life, you know, eternal life in Pure Land or heaven, hell, or another realm. Okay? And I think most religions subscribe to this. In some, part of their teachings talk about that we continue on and attain something much more permanent or eternal. The second one is what I call evolving life, in quotes, within the cycle of birth and death. Okay? So this is the Indian religious worldview, and Buddhism subscribes to this as well. That if we don't attain enlightenment, well, logically, or at least within this framework, we continue to evolve in the cycle of birth and death, or in the cycle of the 6 realms that we talked about yesterday. So I usually draw circular that. So well, here, say this is our life here. We're born and we die, and then if you continue in the cycle of birth and death, you're born again, and you die. And depending on depending on your action, or karma doesn't mean fate, you know. Karma means action. What you do will determine what level you'll be born within that 6 realms. Destinies. Remember yesterday we talked about, you know, heavenly beings to hellish beings, and so you're born, you die, born and die, and this is considered not good. It's considered suffering according to, you know, Indian worldview, and Buddhism has adopted this. It's not the most important teaching, but it's in the background, you know, and then so. The aim, of course, is to be liberated. I use the word gedatsu in Japanese. Or if you become enlightened, awakened, then you are liberated from the cycle of birth and death. Okay? So this reminds me of another American Buddhist joke, and this one's really good and very, very subtle. Okay, so if you've heard it, don't say it. Okay, so there was this medical doctor who happened to be a very devout Buddhist. He took, you know, his religion to his work, so he got fired. Not because he's a Buddhist, you know, but because, you know, the medical doctor, what does he or she do? You sign the death certificate and you determine the cause of death, right? Well, every time he wrote the same thing. He wrote the cause of death, birth. You died because you were born. Isn't that great? It's really, you know, you died, well, because you're born. And it actually, it makes sense from the Buddhist perspective, you know, birth and death are two sides of the same coin or the same sheet. You have birth, you have death. If you have birth, you gotta have death. You know, you can't have birth and have no death. And so, you know, this Buddhist medical doctor, he was right on. He was right on, but unfortunately, it's not what he's supposed to do. Yeah. But okay, all right. So, okay, and the second one, after something continues as an individual, and they're two, eternal and evolving life. And so the aim is, even if you're reborn again, hopefully you meet up with a teaching, and then you can attain liberation or become Buddha. Okay? The ultimate goal of Buddhism is to become a Buddha, an enlightened one, awakened one. Okay. So another one, which under 2B, 2B, rather than maintaining your individuality, you as a part of greater life, there's something greater that some people may call God, or some people may call Amida, or something great. You become part of it. You join that, and then you continue to live on as part of that compassionate force, or the movement as part of that, whatever that life or something great does. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Okay, so, but Buddhism, especially in the early period, and then in some schools, Buddhism doesn't quite answer very clearly what happens after death. And here, under 3, it's not the main concern in the early period of Buddhism and in many schools. And and the one I referred to yesterday, that Buddha was asked, these metaphysical questions, which were, do you remember any of them? There are actually 4 of them. One is the universe eternal? Okay, which means, in terms of space, in terms of time. Is the universe infinite? Means in terms of space. And the second one is, the third one is, is the mind, the spirit, and the body, are they the same? Spirit and the body. And the fourth one is, are the enlightened beings, essentially Buddhas, after they die, what happens to them after the Buddha dies? So these are the 4 questions. Anyway, how did the Buddha reply? Did he reply? Did he answer? No, he didn't answer. He said, these questions are inconsequential for the main effort to attain, main goal of Buddhism is to become Buddha. So the aim is to become enlightened in this life, attain Buddhahood in this life. And so, and there's another one that from more in China, 3.2, emperor asked this monk, Chan master, by the name of Guandao, emperor says, what happens after we die? And Master Guandao says, why are you asking me? Emperor says, well, because you are a Buddhist master. And Master Guandao says, yes, it's true that I am a master, but not a dead one. Okay, so this one is kind of symbolic of, especially in Zen, there's no talk about life after death so much, and essentially because the point is that if you become enlightened, awakened in this life, then the the concern about what happens after you die kind of falls away. So, unfortunately, many of us don't become fully awakened in this life. And we still are, foolish, ordinary beings. Therefore, we are concerned about what happens after we die. And so in this regard, I want to share with you a famous, well-known story that many of you know. It's kind of old, but I'm kind of old. The Fall of Freddie, the Leaf. A Story of Life for All Ages by Leo Buscaglia. So I misspelled. It's not Buscaglia, but Buscaglia. He was a professor at University of Southern California, not UCLA. No, University of Southern California. Trojans. USC. Wait a minute. University of Southern California? Yeah. Not UCLA. They're rivals, you don't get them mixed up. Yeah. Okay. Actually, I was a little shocked when I said, this story is old, and I'm old, and nobody really laughed too much. Because when I used to come here, we were considered the young ministers, but impermanence, okay? So I'm telling myself, accept it, Ken, accept it. Okay. Now, Leo Pascal, interesting, he's a Catholic, he was Catholic. He was a motivational speaker, well-known, but later in his life, he became interested in Buddhism. And actually, when I read the story, even before I knew about his background, I said, gee, for an American writer, this feels very Buddhistic. I said, gee, this is very interesting. And then much later, when I was writing a book on American Buddhism, I checked into his background, and he actually got interested in Buddhism and spent almost a month in Kyoto to study Buddhism. So I said, aha, that's the reason why he talks about this, impermanence. And then he talks about, life. And it really fits in actually with my appreciation of Jodo Shinshu. But anyway, so let's, we want to read the whole story together. And I'm wondering if, I usually, in my school, I used to have the student read, take turns reading it. But maybe we just read it all together. It'll take about a little over 10 minutes. And if you get tired, you can just be quiet. And then some other people will pick up the slack. So is it okay with the video that, or we can have someone actually pass the mic? Oh, okay. All right. So, all right. I have numbered the pages. So, okay. 1, 2, 3. Spring had passed. So had summer. Freddie the leaf, grown large. His midsection was wide and strong. Spirit vermin pointed. He had first appeared in spring as a small sprout on a rather large branch near the top of a tall tree. Freddie was surrounded by hundreds of other leaves, just like himself, or so it seemed. Soon he discovered that no two leaves were alike, even though they were on the same tree. Alfred was the leaf, Ben was the leaf on his right side, and Clara was the lovely leaf overhead. They had all grown up together. They had learned to dance in the spring breezes, bask lazily in the summer sun, and wash off the cooling rains. But it was Daniel who was Freddie's best friend. He was the largest leaf on the limb and seemed to have been there before anyone else. It appeared to Freddie that Daniel was also the wisest among them. It was who told him that they were part of a tree. It was Daniel who explained that they were growing in a public park. It was Daniel who told them that the tree had strong roots, which were hidden in the ground below. He explained about the birds who came to sit on the branch and sing morning songs. He explained about the sun, the moon, the stars, and the season. Okay, stop for a second. Yeah. So here, at the on paragraph 2, he emphasizes the uniqueness of the leaves. That even though they're born on the same limb, that they're all quite different. And that is reflection of the American value. The uniqueness, the individuality. And so when I discussed this in Japan, I really emphasize this part of it because Japan, in my view, lacks this kind of, the value evaluating of the uniqueness. And so, and then you have Daniel, he's like the Buddha. Yeah? So he, though he was born at the same time, he says, it seems like, he was there, he has been there even before anyone else. And he's more like the teacher. He knows everything. He kind of gets you, How come he's so wise? So Daniel. So you have Daniel who will be with him till the very end. Okay, let's go to paragraph 4. 1, 2, 3. Freddie loved being a leaf, loved his branch, his light leafy friends, his place high in the sky, the wind that jostled him about, the sun rays that warmed him, the moon that covered him with soft white shadows. Summer had been especially nice. The long hot days and the warm nights were peaceful and dreamy. There were many people in the park that summer. They often came and sat under Freddie's tree. Daniel told him that giving shade was part of his purpose. What's a purpose? Freddie had asked. A reason for being, Daniel had answered. To make things more pleasant for others is a reason for being. To make shade for old people who come to escape in the heat of their homes is a reason for being. To provide a cool place for children to come and play, to fan with our leaves, the picnickers on the checkered tablecloths. These are all the reasons for being. Freddie's especially like the old people. They sat so quietly on the cool grass and hardly ever moved. They talked in whispers of times past. Children were fun, too, even though they sometimes tore holes in the bark of the tree or carved their names into it. Still, it was fun to watch them so fast and to laugh so much. Okay, stop. Okay, so in these 3 paragraphs, you have reference to purpose for being, purpose for being. And it includes, or it has to do with the leaves being of service to others, other people. And they're providing, the shade for the old people and as well as the young people. And I like the word purpose, reason for being. And so that's how Daniel explains what the purpose for being is. Okay, let's go on. 1, 2, 3. But Freddie's summer soon passed. It vanished on an October night. He had never felt so cold. All the leaves shivered with cold. They were coated with a thin layer of white, which quickly melted and left them dew-drenched and sparkling in the morning sun. Again, it was Daniel who explained that they had experienced their first frost, the sign that it was fall and that winter would come soon. Almost at once, the whole tree, in fact, blaze of color. There was hardly a green leaf left. Alfred had turned a deep yellow. Ben had become a bright orange. Claire had become a blazing red. Daniel a deep purple, and Freddie was red and gold and blue. How beautiful they all looked. Freddie and his friends had made their tree a rainbow. Why did we turn different colors? Freddie was asked. When we are on the same tree, each of us is different. We have had different experiences. We have faced the sun differently. We have cast shade differently. Why should we not have different colors? Daniel said matter-of-factly. Daniel told Freddie that this wonderful season was called fall. Okay, stop. So what you have are two themes. One is the sudden change, the change that of going from summer to fall, and the frost comes, and then thereby changing the color, the fall colors. And so that's the first example of change, impermanence, that this definitely has something to do with his Buddhist interest, I think. And then the other one is, again, is the uniqueness of each leaf. They're all changing colors to different colors. Even though they're on the same limb, they're all different. So the theme of change and the theme of uniqueness. Okay, 1, 2, 3. One day, a very strange thing happened. The same breezes that in the past had made them dance began to push and pull at their stems, almost as if they were angry. This caused some of the leaves to be torn from their branches and swept up in the wind, tossed about and dropped softly to the ground. All the leaves became frightened. "What's happening?" they asked each other in whispers. "It's what happens in fall," Daniel told them. "It's the time for leaves to change their home. Some people call it to die." "Will we all die?" Freddie asked. "Yes," Daniel answered. "Everything dies, no matter how big or small, how weak or strong. We first do our job. We experience the sun and the moon, the wind and the rain. We learn to dance and to laugh. Then we die." "I won't die," said Freddie with determination. "Will you, Daniel?" "Yes," answered Daniel. "Sure," Daniel responded. Freddie noticed that the other leaves continued to fall. He thought it must be their time. He saw that some of the leaves lashed back at the wind before they fell. Others simply let go and dropped quietly. Soon the tree was almost bare. "I'm afraid to die," Freddie told Daniel. I don't know what's down there. We all fear that what we don't know. Freddie, it's natural, Daniel reassured him. Yet you were not afraid when summer became fall. There were natural changes. Why should you be afraid of the season of death? Okay, stop. Okay, here's really the high point of the story. Comes to the high pitch. And what happens is that the leaves start to fall. In other words, to die. Okay. And then, so here, Freddie, he admits, so I'm afraid to die. You know, he's something that I think most of us feel. Nobody wants to die, you know. And so we can all identify with Freddie. But the point that Daniel makes is that death is natural. This is, I think, is another influence, a Buddhist influence. Death is natural. It's like seasonal change. And so the earlier I talked about how death and birth and death are two sides of the same sheet or same side of the same coin. So if you're born and you die, it's nothing to be afraid of, be shameful of. It's not a failure. It's not, tragedy. Well, I wouldn't say tragedy. Well, let's just say it's not a failure. It's natural. And so this message is much clearer than what we normally feel and in the larger American public, I think. And one of the reasons why this book became so popular and sold, I believe, 5 million copies. And even in Japan, it was translated. It sold over 1 million copies. And it's very famous in Japan as well. Was famous in Japan. Okay, so I think the message here was something that was rather fresh, something that was new, and it was written as children's story, but actually adults read it, and adults really felt moved by it, and that's why they read them to their kids. And so that's the reason for the popularity and the success of this story. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, now 13. Does this tree? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Does this tree die too? Freddie asked. Someday, but there is something stronger than the tree. It is life that lasts forever, and we are all a part of life. Where will we go when we die? No one knows for sure. That's the great mystery. We will return in the skin, but we may not, but life will. Then what has been the reason for all this? Freddie continued to question. Why were we here at all if we only have to fall and die? Daniel answered in his matter-of-fact way, it's been about the sun and the moon. It's been about the happy times together. It's been about the shade and the old people and the children. It's been about colors in the fall. It's been about the seasons. Isn't that enough? That afternoon, in the golden light of dusk, Daniel let go. He fell effortlessly. He seemed to smile peacefully as he fell. Goodbye for now, Freddie said. He said, stop. Okay, so Daniel leaves, and if you notice, Daniel leaves without fighting it. Earlier, too, you had some leaves who were fighting back against the wind, and others who just simply let go. And so these are different ways that, humans experience death. But Daniel, to his credit, or, like a Buddha, he went very peacefully. The Buddha died peacefully. You see the images of the Shakyamuni Buddha in Southeast Asia. They're reclining on his right side, and he died peacefully. And so there may be something about someone who has attained some spiritual awareness and understanding that they go peacefully. But having said that, I don't think it's as simple, because I think that death comes in different ways. Physically, you can be the best person, the nicest person in the world, but you can really have lots of pain, because that's more of a physical thing. I'm not a doctor, of course, but I feel that's we shouldn't judge people on the basis of how people die. Okay, let's go. Then 15. 1, 2, 3. Then Freddie was all alone, the only leaf on his branch. The first snow fell the following morning. It was soft, white, and gentle, but it was bitter cold. There was hardly any sun that day, and the day was very short. Freddie found himself losing his color, becoming brittle. It was constantly cold, and the snow weighed heavily upon him. At dawn, the wind came that took Freddie from his branch. It didn't hurt at all. He felt himself float quietly, gently, and softly downward. As he fell, he saw the whole tree for the first time. How strong and firm it was. He was sure that it would live for a long time, and he knew that he had been part of its life and made them proud. Freddie landed on a clump of snow. It somehow felt soft and even warm. In his new position, he was more comfortable than he had ever been. He closed his eyes and fell asleep. He did not know that spring would follow and that the snow would melt into water. He did not know that what appeared to be his useless dry self would join with the water and serve to make the tree stronger. Most of all, he did not know that there, asleep in the tree and the ground, were already plants for new leaves in the spring. Hey, nice story, huh? Yeah. So Freddie finally lets go, and he looks up and he sees the tree and how firm it is, and he is sure that it would live for a long time. And then the other thing is, it says at the top of 16, at dawn the wind came that took Freddie from his branch. It didn't hurt at all. It kind of gives us some comfort. It didn't hurt at all. And then the other message here is that he actually returns to life. The life with a capital letter, life, not small life, but big life. And so the implication is that he emerged from life, became a leaf, and then he returns to this life. And this life continues on, and it will beget and give birth to more life, little life. And that's how the story ends. Okay, so I have 5 key themes of the story, which are kind of a repeat of what I just said, but I think just, everything changes, but change is natural. So everything changes. It's really true, you came here about an hour ago, and during that time, actually, they say thousands of cells in your body have died and new cells have been born. And though we can't see it, within the scope of the entire world, tens of thousands of people have been born and tens of thousands of people have died. They're not here, and then actually the earth is moving all the time. So physically, but we're more concerned about our, mentally, and then our own selves, how we undergo change. But the point again is that change is natural. It's not a defeat. It's not unnatural. It shouldn't be disappointment. That it's natural. And death is also natural, and so change is natural, and so death is natural. When I was growing up, going to Dharma school, I don't know which pledge it is, but maybe someone, I haven't located where it was, but there's a phrase that says, those who are facing a great change, men call death, right? That one phrase has always kind of stuck in my mind. Death is a change, although it's a great change, but it's a great change and nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to consider. It's not unnatural. Okay, so these numbers that I have here are noted in the paragraphs. Number 3, meaning of life can be found in what we enjoyed and did in life, especially what we did for others. So paragraph 14, if you turn back to paragraph 14, and actually from 13, Freddie asked, if he just, die, what's the purpose of all this? And then Daniel talks about, the purpose for being, and that is, working together to be of benefit to other people, having made a difference with other people, and that is something that we can all be proud of. And then also there's talk about sun and the moon, and to me they represent beauty. I think we should make more of beauty. That in life there's beauty of nature, beauty of fine arts, beauty of in people's smiles. The beauty is an expression of something that is worthy as we live our lives. And so, but I think that especially the point about having worked together to contribute to others, that has meaning, and Daniel emphasizes that. Okay, and then number 4, the last part is we are a part of life in a big life, okay? We emerge from life, are sustained by life, and return to life. And that's the way I imagine this. And then there's another image that I want to share with you. It's the one some people have probably seen. It's the wave in the ocean. And one way of looking at this, when I am born, taking this form as an individual human being, I am a wave. Okay? And where did we come from? We came from the ocean. And then as we grow into adulthood and we exercise our knowledge and ability and reach out as high as possible, and then gradually the wave becomes smaller and smaller, and we disappear as a form. But we don't disappear, we disappear back into the ocean, life itself, life in the capital. And then the other important thing is that when I'm a wave, I'm not separate from life, right? We're part of life. We we are sustained by life because you can't have a wave without the ocean. And so the wave is dependent on all the other sources of life or life itself. And then, again, when it disappears, you don't disappear, form disappears, but the water returns to the ocean. That is another way of looking at it. And so, the last key message we can take away from the story as a Shin Buddhist, okay? The above were the points that we can glean from the story. Just as a non-Buddhist, or anybody can, to get these points from the story. But number 6 is where I think this is more my appreciation. We can appreciate life that I talked about as immeasurable life, which we call Amida. It's a way of appreciating, okay? I'm not saying the ocean is Amida, but for me, it makes sense logically to perceive Amida as more like the ocean than the Amida up there in the sky. And if you notice in this story, you have the ocean, and someone asked yesterday, "Where's Amida? Is Amida over here and over there?" No, Amida is the ocean. Amida is the ocean. You let go, and then Amida supports you. And so I have a really good scholar friend whom I respect very much, and he's a great Shin scholar. And I was having dinner with him, and I asked him, "How do you perceive Amida?" And he right away he said, "No, I don't see him like up there. I see him behind me and under me, underneath, supporting me, and behind me, always embracing me and being supportive." So it's a different way of perceiving what we consider to be most important. And so that's another. For me, I have an easier time appreciating what Amida means to me. And then we are in a circle of compassion, the other power. So the other power is none other than Amida. So Amida's other power, of course. But the word circle of compassion, I've been using this, and then let me, so yesterday I drew this, the horizontal and the vertical, and I'll talk more about it later, but I said Buddhist path is to climb this path to reach to become a Buddha. So, and this is something we need to do. I wouldn't say 100% you must do, but in order to appreciate what Shin Buddhism is talking about, we need to make effort. Making effort is different from self-power. We often say, "Well, that's self-power, so we shouldn't do it." Make self-effort and self-power are different. But self-power means that you take credit for any result. That I'm doing this, and my effort becomes the cause of awakening. In our tradition, it's the Amida's working that leads us to awakening. So that's the difference. But the effort is important. So anyway, but no matter how hard you do, I think as lay people, we can't get too far beyond this. So I let's say Shinjin is somewhere around here, and well then, how do you make up the difference? And I said it's okay, because we are in the circle of compassion. And we have the third element of the scheme. It's this circle. Amidas, Ra, and working. And so, even if you're here, you're probably all thinking, well, where am I? It doesn't matter ultimately. It doesn't matter ultimately because what determines it is that you are already in the circle. Here, or here, or here, or here. And then once you realize that, then you okay, we'll talk more about that later. But that's the way you can schematize it, okay? So Dexter stood up, and that means it's a sign I have to end. Okay, so I think I was going to go end anyway, so it's quite good timing. Okay, so we'll end section 1.
Yeah, so we do have a few minutes if there are any questions about this section. So I'll give you the mic so that we can properly record everything.
Oh, the microphone.
Because that's not working. You should work here.
Yeah.
Anybody? Okay.
Oh, hello. Hello again.
Hello.
You keep saying that the goal is to become a Buddha in this life.
No, I didn't say in this life.
Oh, what did you say?
Goal is to become a Buddha. That's the, yeah. Well, yeah, ultimate goal is to become a Buddha. Yeah. Of course we aspire to become a Buddha, yes. But in Jodo Shinshu, the teaching says that we cannot become a fully enlightened Buddha in this life.
Oh, because I've heard other people say that we aspire to become a Buddha in this life or attain enlightenment in this life. So, but then other people say when you die, that's when you attain Buddhahood. So I just was asking clarification on that part.
We're talking about Jodo. You said other people. I don't know who these other people are.
Other Shin
Buddhists? Of course, as Buddhists, we aspire to attain Buddhahood, and hopefully in this life. But we have to base ourselves on what Shinran Shonin talked about. He's the guide, and he says that he could not attain Buddhahood in this life, but he was able to attain a Shinjin, which is a form of awakening. Okay? And so, but he was satisfied with that because he knew and he entrusted his teacher that said, if you attain Shinjin, and then this is a guarantee that you will become a fully awakened Buddha as soon as you die. That's the teaching. So that's the Jodo Shinshu teaching. So you have to have that, be clear about that. But my point is that then you say, well, Shinjin is kind of, it's kind of half-baked. It's not full-fledged Buddhahood. But if you can attain Shinjin, that's good enough. It's good enough. Oh, yeah. I'll be happy with that, Okay, so, no, I want him to be, are you okay with my explanation?
Yes, I am. I'm still thinking you did say that we are trying to become a Buddha in this life.
Yeah. No, again, we all aspire to try to become Buddha in this life, that's the ultimate goal. But you realize as you try, right now, that's right. I forgot to preface my talk today that we fell overboard, and we are at this stage now. We're trying. We're swimming here. Is a stage of trying to become a Buddha, reach the island. Okay, so yes, you try the best you can to become awakened. So maybe you shouldn't get too caught up on being a Buddha, but trying to become awakened. And then as you do this, the more you try, you would realize that you cannot get rid of all your gas. You cannot overcome your gas. Okay, right? So that's when Shin teaching makes sense. So yeah, just continue to, and then you will come to realize, two things. One, that you have lots of limitations, but you are embraced in the compassion of your wife. Oh. No, I told you, she is a manifestation of Amida.
Just to end my portion of it, my very good Buddhist friend, a good Buddhist friend, says he doesn't worry about life after death or trying or whatever. He just says, I accept and go on with his life and try to be a good person.
Well, if you can do that, if you can really do that, then that's the way we should do it, and we should be happy for him. And it's that full letting go is not that easy. It's not that easy. And so if this friend really has reached that level, that's more power to him. Yeah. Okay. But don't worry about your friend. Worry about yourself. Remember?
Can you provide us with a very, I can't say simple, but a good definition of Amida Buddha? In trying to describe Amida Buddha, even to a non-Buddhist, very difficult to do so, I think. But how would you describe Amida Buddha?
Well, again, one way is he's like Christian God, but he's not a creator. And Buddha, Amida represents the spirit, the dimension of God's spirit. And so that's one way, yeah. And another way would be to talk about, as we did in this story, that it's a life force. It says life here, but I've used the word life force actually in the Ocean book. A life force that sustains my life in terms of spiritually, mentally, physically. All these things represent what we call life force or immeasurable life. Actually, the meaning of Amida is immeasurable. Immeasurable. And then there's a So Amida has two dimensions: immeasurable light, immeasurable life. And so I have been focusing on life, and like life-giving force that gives life. And this, one way of appreciating it, I talked about this yesterday. That water to me is an expression of immeasurable life, because without it, we'll be in trouble, We can't flush our toilets. And on and on. there are more important things than that, but that's very important. So you can say life is Amida is a symbol of the life-giving force that sustains my life physically, mentally, and spiritually. But ultimately, it's spiritually. Okay? Because spiritually is what leads us to a sense of, a gratitude, a sense of ease, a sense that I accept, that I'm okay, just as I am. So, yeah, there are different ways of Amida, but I think you have to also try to come up with what you consider to be, what you consider comfortable yourself. And again, it depends on with whom you're talking. Because, if you're talking to a Christian, you may say what I just said, we're not, we believe in something that's greater, but and we call him or it or Amida, and it has similar qualities like the, compassion, love, but he is not a judge, he's not a creator, and so things like that. So yeah, maybe we can talk more. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So we will take a break now. If you have questions, again, please just write them down on your card, and give them to either the front desk or myself, and we'll try to consider those at least at the end of at the second question and answer period. So we'll reconvene at 8 o'clock, so please visit Yoshiko's bookstore and get refreshments, and the restrooms are this way.
I can sign them here.
Okay, and maybe you can be here. He's like a sports celebrity. Okay, so yeah, we'll reconvene at 8 o'clock. Hello. We have about a minute, in order to finalize your break duties. And so we'll be starting in about 60 seconds. So, please kind of begin heading back to your seats for our part 2 for tonight. Yoshiko says the bookstore is only a one-day event. So you have like 1 hour before the bookstore closes and disappears forever. Then you'd have to go all the way to, to the Betsuin headquarters office to get the books. So, okay. So it doesn't really disappear. It just. Okay. So any question and answer cards you want to hand in? Okay, so we've given Dr. Ken like a 1 minute breather, and so here he is again.
Okay, we'd like to start the second session entitled Confronting the Death of Our Loved Ones. And, confronting may not be the best word, maybe facing up to, maybe better, but, confronting is okay too. So basically to look at and to pay attention to death of our loved ones. And so as I have it under the first category, when we say that, we are talking about two categories of people. Those loved ones who have passed on, and then those who are still alive. So when I say loved ones also mean people who are still living. And then I will be asking later for you to think of one person who is living and also one person who has passed on, those who have made a lot of difference, who mean much to you. And I would like for you to have them as objects of your thoughts and exercises that we'll be doing. Okay, so now among those who have passed on, so we'll talk about people who have passed on. And, all of us know of people who have passed on. And some of them may be very, very dear to you. And so as you think about them, under 8, among those who have passed on, there are various kinds of death. This is not just loved ones, but anybody in general, people in general. So first category, deaths we can more easily accept. So these are deaths of old people, of those on the death penalty. When they die, he said, well, that's according to law. Or when soldiers die, you think, well, there's a high probability and things like that. But these are people in general. Okay, you hear about them in the news. Just recently in Japan, the Mr. Matsumoto, who is the head of the Om Shindikyo, the famous, notorious subway terrorist, the organization. Well, it's been almost 20 years. It was 1994 or 5, right? So it's been over 20 years, and finally he was put to death, and along with 6 others. So it was the largest ever execution since the war, at least, and it was a big news. But when you hear something like, well, I'm sure a lot of people say, well, he deserved it, So even although from a Buddhist standpoint, capital punishment is problematic, but and then death we find difficult to accept. Death of young persons from accident and natural disasters, homicides and suicides. These are unusual, unexpected. So, and then deaths we find extremely difficult to accept, and that of our family and friends. So, Buddhist attitude towards death and ways of dying, probably the best place to start is retell that story of Kissa Gotami and the mustard seed. Most of you know this very well, so I'm going to help you. I want you to help me tell the story, okay? So, who's carrying the deceased child? The mother, yes. The mother, the young mother of a deceased child is running around the village saying, please, please, bring this child back to life. But everybody knows that the child has died. And she probably feels it too, but she cannot accept it. And then an elder of the village tells her something. What does he tell her? Yeah, go, there is a famous monk visiting outside the outskirts of the village. Go see him. And so she perks up and says, oh, he may bring my child back to life. So she rushes over there, and the Buddha welcomes her. And then okay, so he says, I want you to get something from the village. What is that? Mustard seed, yeah. And she says, oh, good. If I can get a mustard seed from a village, a house in a village, then my child may come back to life. And as she was leaving, the Buddha says, oh, wait a minute. There is a condition. What is that condition?
House that hasn't experienced death.
Yes, house that has not experienced death. But she doesn't think much of it. Oh, well, So she goes to the first one, and they have a mustard seed. But she says, oh, by the way, you haven't experienced death in your family. And the person says, yes, we have. A year ago, we lost our grandfather. And okay. Then she goes to the next one. And they too have mustard seed. And the same question. Yes, we actually lost a child. And then on and on and on. Every house has a mustard seed to give her, but they've all experienced death. But she doesn't want to give up because, it means her child could come back to life. And so she goes on till almost at sunset. Then all of a sudden she realizes, oh, I understand. death happens to everybody. And she has a kind of a awakening, and she goes back to the Buddha and says, Sir, I understand. And death happens to everyone. Death is universal. And so Buddha is a great teacher, doesn't tell her how things are, has her go around to find out for herself. And so she carries out a funeral for the child, and she decides to become a nun and become his disciple. And the story goes that she did become a eminent nun, a great teacher to others. So that's the story. And this story is probably the most famous Buddhist story, a parable, that's common to all Buddhists. Okay. Now, so we'll come back to that. But also in Buddhism, earlier we said the real intent of Buddhism was how to become enlightened in this life. But actually, as a religion, as it developed throughout Asia, you couldn't just go on that teaching alone, because a religion has to deal with funerals and assist and console people when they experience death in the family. So they began to deal with death in many, many ways. So one of these has to do with, and I'm going to go to 3 instead first, deathbed ceremony with strings attached to the statue of the Amida. So just giving you one example of in the Heian period, when Pure Land Buddhism especially became popular, you had Amida statues, and a dying person will be surrounded by their family, and then surrounded by the hopefully some monks and priests and chanting. And the deceased person would hold on to 5 colored strings that would be attached to the statue of Amida Buddha, and which would the Buddha who would welcome the dying person to the Pure Land, and people chanting, and so it's a kind of a comforting situation, a deathbed situation. So Buddhism began to deal with that kind of ritual and rites. Also, for monks, I guess, there was a teaching that sought to realize pure mind or right mind at the moment of death. So the aim is to die with a right mind. If the mind is, impure or, is disturbed, then it would lead to a lower level of rebirth. And so the monks and nuns would aspire to, practice all through life and make sure that the very end of life that one would attain this pure mind or the right mind. And so that was one of the aims and dealing with death. I just remembered, going back to the earlier one about the deathbed, I don't know, there are ministers here, I'm sure the bishop and others have encountered the pillow service, and then, or be there when the person is dying. And when I was a minister for a short time, 3 years, I had a very precious experience of being at the side when one of our devout members passed away. And there was not much I could do except to be there, and that was good enough for the family. And I think it's one of the great services that a minister can do, to be there as much as possible. And so there's not much I could do. The family's around, and so I chanted most of the time. And so they really appreciated that, and so did, it seemed like Mrs. Tanaka is her name, and she did too. I don't know if I should talk about this. This is a kind of a humorous situation within this, a dying situation. What happened was the husband, who hardly ever went to church, I saw him once in a while. She came all the time. And so he goes to the wife and says, I'll see you, And then the dying wife says, where? I don't know. Well, that she did, actually. And husband says, because he doesn't go to church, he says, heaven. And the relatives all around the bed, they say, no. Like, it was so, I'm chanting, and I hear this, and I'm ready to almost burst out laughing, And then he says, what? What did I say wrong? He goes, pure land. And he goes, oh, see you in the pure land. And she says, and so that was the situation. And I thought to myself, this is so hilarious within, the tragedy of losing a mother and a wife. But so make sure, guys, go to church. Or opposite, make sure when your spouse goes, don't tell her or him the wrong place. Okay. Well, this is another thing too, is that her kids became fundamental Christians. And she often came in, she talked to me about the trouble having kids who are so sad because they won't be able to see her mother in the afterlife. When you think about it, it's kind of sad. That's my example of kind of. I don't know. I may get into trouble calling them religion of belief. That this is the right way. This is the only way, and so they think anybody else, they're not going to go to the same place. But from my point of view, well, we'll go to the same place. No, well, this is a little more complicated, but I told her, tell them that, heaven or Pure Land is basically the same. And then you might go into one door, another person will go in the other door. This is not doctrinal, okay? I told her to console her and also the kids. Because their kids are actually, I think, quite narrow-minded, that they're not able to see the bigger picture and start feeling fearful of their for her. But anyway, that's the whole issue of interreligious conflict. And okay, so I think we don't have too much time in the second part. So please go to page 4, and then. I'm talking differences among cultures in how we treat the deceased. And I think that, I don't know, this is my impression that American, at least modern culture, death is kind of like a taboo. And we shouldn't talk about it too much. And death is kind of a failure. You lost. It's not certainly far from the sense of natural that we saw within the Buddhist point of view. So anyway, and compared to that, having lived in Japan, the Japanese sense of life after death is quite different in that even though you're not really religious, their sense is that their deceased ancestors are always nearby. They're always around, protecting you. And so I think it's kind of nice. And then they have the Buddhist altar, and you'll often see the widow going to the Buddhist altar and talking as if, she's actually talking to the husband. And sometimes the husband returns in the show and they're talking to each other, and then he disappears, But, it's a sense of, not too far beyond. And I don't know if you know, this is kind of a art history-ish fact, but in Japan, they developed a new kind of Amida. Amida who is right over the mountain, and it's Yamagoshimida. And there are these mountains, and then the Amida, huge, figure, just right beyond the mountain. And that's an indication of how Amida is not, billions of miles away in the western direction. And this, I understand, is unique to Japan. You don't even find it in China. And so that this is something, is another indication that for the Japanese in general, that the deceased are always around as more like a protector. And maybe that's why they don't go to church so much. But they don't need it, maybe. I don't know. So the other thing is obon. Obon is one, the common story is that the deceased return. And actually, in Mexico, they have the same kind of holiday, which I kind of knew about, but there's a new movie out. Have you seen? Have you seen the new movie? It's called something about, well, anyway, in English is, in Spanish, is Dia de los Muertos. So it's the Day of the Dead. And that's actually almost like Japanese obon. They talk about the deceased coming back from October the 30th to November 2nd, or something like that. November 2nd is my birthday. Okay, it doesn't really. Okay, all right. So now I'm gonna have you heard of Nikon therapy? Okay, Nikon therapy and Reverend Sengoku, Mari Sengoku. She used to be a minister here in Hawaii. She's gone back to Japan and she's become one of the proponents of Nikon therapy. And what you do is you go to a center and you stay there for one whole week. No cell phones, no TV, no nothing. You just sit in your room and you contemplate on 3 questions. Every 2-3 hours, someone will come and kind of say, well, how did it go? But they don't really, pursue more than that. You just say a few words and that's it. And so you spend a whole week all by yourself thinking about these 3 questions. Well, we're not going to do it for the whole week here. We'll just do it for a few minutes. But these are the questions. We're talking about the most important loved one who has passed on, okay, not living. What he or she did for me, okay? So what I'm going to have you do is kind of sit in quiet, sitting like in meditation. Oops, we don't want to say meditation in a Shinshu temple center. No, it's okay, we can say that. Yeah. All right, so just sit, and if any of you do mindfulness, you can do this. Left hand over right, and then just relax, and then straight up. And then you breathe through your nose, okay, naturally. You can have your eyes closed or half opened. And when you breathe out, the upper, right above your lips, and then right under your nose, that area, you can feel it, the warmth of the breath. And then when you breathe in, the coolness of the breath. And the aim is to always get your consciousness concentrated right under your nose and right above your lips. And then feel the breathing. Well, mindfulness practice is basically this, but we won't be doing that. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do is imagine or think of your deceased loved one and ask, what did he or she do for you? And then go back to the earliest time that you knew that person, and try to kind of imagine and the events and things that he or she did for you. We'll do this for a couple minutes. Okay, now think of what did you do for her or him in return? How did you pay back? Okay, the last question is, what trouble have you caused for that person? What difficulties have you caused? Okay, thank you. We should actually do it much longer, but imagine if you did just on that first question for days, and you can think of, well, I can't think of that much, but actually, they say the longer you concentrate it, so much just keep coming up, and so much within your unconscious almost, and in memory that's not conscious. So that gives you a sense of how important that person was. You probably or may have found that that person may have done more than you thought he or she did. Often this kind of therapy works for people who feel disgruntled, who is kind of upset at a certain people in the thing, but through this process realize that he or she had gained much more, had been given much more than previously thought. And so, there's a transformation that occurs of being, complaining to being more grateful for what that person has done for the participant. So, number 12, how we can relate to those deceased loved ones. And, one thing, yesterday I talked about Dr. Bloom, and he is one person that I think about. So, and the first thing is to make sure that I am personally leading a happy and meaningful life, and that will be the greatest source of joy and comfort for that person, because often people that you're probably thinking are family members, parents, maybe maybe your spouse, and so that is to make sure that you yourself is leading a happy and meaningful life. That's the best gift that you can give to that person. Second one is also to think about the things, thoughts or the ideology or things that they felt very strongly about or things that they loved. I have here, think about what they believed strongly. And in my, as I think about, say, Dr. Bloom, he believed very strongly in propagating the Dharma. He was trying to do that till the very end of his life. And so, in my case, by my doing what I'm doing, I'm together with him. I always feel like I'm together with him. Or on the personal, kind of a lighthearted way, things that he or she liked in terms of food. So, apple pie, If that person like apple pie, when you're having apple pie, think of that person and doing things that they enjoy doing. Whenever you are participating in things that represent them, then always kind of know that you are together with that person. The lastly is something that I've been kind of doing more recently is that, I lost my younger brother suddenly. We don't know the cause. He was found dead in his bedroom at 60, he was 65. He's 2 years younger than me. So a younger brother is harder to, take than an older brother. And so, and then there's a sense of kind of not a guilt feeling, but, I'm still alive and he's no longer here. And then so sometimes, thoughts pop up. And when it does, I used to feel kind of guilty or, well, what should I do? And then I always also thought of, I try to affirm it. The thoughts that I get about my brother, whenever I get that, it could be just, getting on a train or, walking, it just pops up. And then at that point, I don't try to put it away. I put my hand to my heart. I'll first take a deep breath, and then put my hand to the heart. And then quietly or loudly, whatever case, I say the Nembutsu. And it helps a bit. And so, so it's not pushing away, but it's affirming and acknowledging. And it's a kind of a technique that, I thought about, and I just wanted to share. And I think reciting Nembutsu as a Shin Buddhist is the best way of expressing your ultimate concern. And together, you are one. And, say Nama Amida Butsu, and he's within that, in that compassionate working. So, and you feel a little bit relieved. Okay, so those are some of the things that we can think about the deceased loved one. Okay, now we're talking about death of those who are still with us, but eventually we will depart through death, at least on this earth. Yeah. So now again, the death of strangers, people who are living here, they don't concern as much. But those among them, we do think about the impending death of those who are terminal, those with serious illness, and those who are extremely old, in their close to 100. There's not much time for them. And so you think about them. But, and the another thing is, this is a different take, is that everybody that we know who are alive will eventually die. And regardless of their age or status. And so, sometimes you have people that you don't like. We talked about that yesterday. But you have to get along, One thing to overcome that kind of anger, or not anger, but kind of aversion for that person, is to think, even this person will eventually die. He's going to die too. No, try it. I've done it once, I have this person, he's going to go too. And then you feel like, oh, well, then, why get so upset, And it does help you to generate a little bit of compassion. And okay, now, we want to do Nikon therapy again. Now for a person who is alive, okay, who means a lot to you. It could be your spouse, your child, or your good friend. And so, please. Okay, start. So this person, what did he or she been doing for me? Next, what I did in return, what I have done for him or her. Okay, finally, what difficulties have I caused? Okay, thank you. So, hopefully that simple exercise may have given you a different way of looking at that special person. And so, and finally, for the people who are alive, okay, under page under 15, I have listed a number of key thoughts. First of all, universality of death. Death hits everyone. And Kisa Gotami's story expresses that so well. And then also there is no set order in the time of death, that child can die before the parents. And so this you know, and but this is in a way it's sad. I mean sad, but it's hard, maybe hard. But this is the reality. And I said yesterday that Buddhism is a teaching, a religion that asks us to see reality or how things are. Impermanence, interdependence, life is a bumpy road. These are the facts. Now, one thing, I've always had little problem with the Kisa Gotami story because it doesn't ask why that child died. And I asked Dr. Bloom one time, because I was younger and still asking questions, and he said, no religion has a good answer for why something like that happens. Buddhism has said, well, it's that child's karma, but that's not the real teaching. In monotheism, they may say, well, it's God's will, but there is no satisfactory answer. That's the reality. The Kisa Gotami story talks about impermanence of death, but it doesn't explain why the child dies so young, right? And so, and then in my ocean story, I struggle with that. And then chapter 11, I talk about why bad things happen to good people. And then I talk about objective conditions and personal karma and Buddha's karma. So if you're interested in this issue, please read that chapter. Okay, and then we treasure what we have. So what's important is that, we will eventually be separated by death. We don't know which one will go first, but we'll be separated, at least on earth. Okay? So we need to treasure what we have right now, here and now. And Buddha also talked about, that recently famed phrase, yesterday is history, tomorrow's a mystery, but this moment is a gift. That's why we call it the present. Okay? I really like that. And that's actually based on the Buddha's passage that's very similar. It says,
Yesterday is gone, tomorrow hasn't here. So this moment in front of you, aspire to do what you can here and now. We ought to talk to each other about death and all the issues surrounding it, especially to your spouse and children. I bet very few families do that. Even with myself and my wife, we have never, talked directly about our death. We're not talking about kind of theoretical death, our death. And what happened was 5 years ago, or maybe 4 years ago, that she had an X-ray taken, and she had pneumonia, and then it wouldn't go away, and then took a X-ray again, and the doctor said there's a 50-50 chance that it's cancer. And oh boy, so we go to the hospital, and we were told the same thing at a big hospital. So it was pretty trying times, But it ended up that it wasn't cancer, that it was a pneumonia. The mark hadn't disappeared, so it stayed on a little bit longer. So she was okay. But when we weren't sure, we sat down. Not that we said, well, let's talk about this, but we started talking about each other's death, and it was in the basement of a department store, and we both had tears in our eyes, and it was kind of surreal, kind of everyday shopping place that we go all the time, and here we're talking about each other's death, but it was good in a sense that I had a chance to tell her that it's been great. In fact, the most important thing in my life is you, the fact that I met you, and hopefully it's the same for you. And I'm waiting. No, actually, I didn't ask that question. I just told her. But I know it is. You know why? Because she said, at that time she said, I don't mind going now because I'm, in my 60s, but there's one regret that I have. And I said, what is it? And he goes, to leave you behind. And so I took it to mean that, she feels bad to have me behind without her, So, and I'm sure that's what she meant. It didn't mean something else, like, I feel bad to leave you behind because I cannot trust you. No, I didn't think about things like that at that moment. I was just so, appreciative and grateful that I had, a person say that to me. And but it's a kind of that crisis that forced us to really talk about it. But it's really been good because then now we are able to talk about, well, where are we going to have our ashes, and we debate, because I kind of hate to admit this, not hate, but it's okay. But I said my fear of death was the reason why I got into Buddhism. But it took a long time for me, and so I would say even 20 years ago or 25 years ago, I didn't want to talk about where my ashes going to be. But after and after through my realization of Buddhism, that I'm at a much better place in terms of my concerns for death, and I feel like if I'm told that I have only 6 months or even 3 months, it will be much easier. It will be much easier. But anyway, so we were able to talk about, we'll have our ashes in Mountain View Temple where I was raised, and she's agreed to do that. And then, but she says, I want half of mine in Japan as well, with her parents. I said, fine. So such is when we confront and face up to death, it in a way it enriches our lives. In a way, the more I think about the fact that we're not going to be here forever, and that there's no guarantee even about tomorrow. So that's another motivation not to get too angry when she orders you around, and I have to say, yes, dear. So I'm saying, yes, dear. Ever since that time, there's been a slight, not a whole lot, but a slight improvement in my appreciation of her and willingness to, work together. And so, as I say, marriage is a real, what do you call it? It's practice. It requires practice. Let's just say, I learned a lot from marriage and the relationship. And I feel like being a monk and a nun away from all this, and people really revere them as, being, so dedicated. I think in some ways it's easier. But it's tougher living in a world with jobs and kids and, marrying. So, and relationships at work, etc. So, again, we have talked about death at two levels. One for me personally, first person, and one third person or second person. And the latter part, if you realize that, of what we talked about, then again, you cannot help but to, treat that person better and to and to find the preciousness in every moment that we have together. And that concludes my talk for the second one.
Thank you, Dr. Tanaka. We have time for maybe one or two questions before 9 o'clock, and then afterwards, Dr. Tanaka, probably just like in this area, he will have Pauhana talk story for those that
Let me say why I have asked for this kind of session is that when I give talks in Japan, one of my joys is afterwards I have what is called in Japanese Nehan Jakujokai. And those who know Nehan Jakujokai, Nehan is nirvana, and Jakujo is tranquility. But nirvana is like bliss, right? Nirvana is bliss. So what it is we get together over wine or beer, and the first beer, first gulp of the beer is almost like the nirvana ecstasy. And so, if anyone is interested, he said half an hour, but we might. We won't go beyond 10 o'clock, and you can leave anytime, and you can, So.
Unfortunately, this was kind of last minute, so we don't have the beer tonight, but we'll have it tomorrow.
Oh no. Okay, so we got to talk about who's going to bring the beer and the wine.
I'll have to get the beer and the poke and
it's
stuff
okay.
like that.
We have
for the rest of the week. We'll be
we don't need. We have some stuff back there.
We have the.
Yeah, I'll bring some.
Okay. So any questions that the audience would like to share?
Yes.
On the way to Shenzhen, right? Hello?
Yeah.
We're on our way to Shenzhen, living our lives, right? We're on our aspiring for Shenzhen. Well, we're aspiring for beyond that, but Shenzhen is more practical. I hope. We attain Shenzhen, but on the way to Shenzhen, we keep the whole thing about letting go. But then our life is like a process of letting go, right? And letting go.
Well.
Is it? I mean.
Well, what letting go? What are you talking about when you let go?
Of struggle, of that hanging on, of trying so hard.
Yeah.
So that should be getting easier, right? As we're.
Yeah. As you say, we learn through. Tomorrow, I'll be talking more about the Eightfold Noble Path or Six Paramitas, and that's where we try to be better people. Better Buddhists, and we ought to do that. But we will learn quickly that no matter how hard you try, you still have our attachments. So you let go, but you still have attachments. So you'll be doing that all your life. And then if you feel that you have to let everything go and have no attachment, then you'll be doomed, right? And so you know that you can't get up there. And so, but Shinshu, the teaching of Shinran Shonin is that wherever you are, even with the attachment and even with the difficulty of letting go, if you realize that you are okay already in the circle, you're already in the circle, then you'll be fine just as you are. And that realization, if you feel it really strongly, that is, you can call it Shinjin. But sometimes it's not that easy to come to that realization. And so, but keep letting go and not being attached, but also to be cognizant of the teaching that you are fine just the way you are, and at some point that will kind of flower and set in and say, oh, I'm okay. Like this. I'll talk about this one later. But this sailor, he lets go and releases him, his kind of attachment or letting go of the notion that you have to let go. Yeah. So that's important. You feel like you got to let go, but you realize that you cannot let go, and then there's kind of a comfort in that. And so, and then the other important thing is I think that continuing to study and to search sincerely for a long amount of time, that already is always an indication. I call it a signpost that is you are already within Shinjin. So Shinjin may be not a point, but it's more like a path, So you're on the path, so you're fine, and just relax. But you want to continue to study, You want to continue to study, and yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah, good question.
One
This is
more?
a really important question, and.
Okay, so we'll maybe bring this to a close for tonight, and we'll see you all hopefully tomorrow. Be beer at Pauhana tomorrow night.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Thank you so much, and drive safely home.
Okay, those who want to remain will just help set up a table here and